Thanks so much. It's a great privilege to be here. And to present the stuff, like, both to officers who've been part of the studies since very inception and folks who kind of been a little bit more skeptical about what it is that we're going to talk about. So this is, in some sense, it's a little different from the other papers because this is not core NREGS as much as it's about implementation issues, and that's kind of why we sit in this session. And this is, is this not working?
There's no pointer.
Sorry?
If you move the arrow.
The side.
Oh, the side. That's what put it.
I think not those sides.
Point it to yourself.
To navigate. No, I'm just trying to No, the screen is hung. It's hung. Okay. So fix my time. My time doesn't matter. We fix this. Some of the whole computer is hung. The whole computer is frozen.
My God, what is it?
Sorry. No.
Click the presentation again. It's in the timer window.
Now
you can do it.
That works. Perfect. Got it. Okay, so it's a great privilege to be here. This is joint work with Paul Meehouse and Sandeep Soklankar. Paul works at ECSC, Sandeep at government. And so this is work on the implementation side of NData. And the background to all of this is really about payments infrastructure much more broadly. So if you think about sending and receiving money is pretty fundamental to the scale and scope of the economy. And you can only transact if you can exchange goods and services for payments. And so historically, we kind of take it for granted that you can do these things like online shopping and mail order and stuff like that. But historically, this is really hard in terms of conducting trade across time and space. And so there's a lot of work showing the importance of informal networks in kind of conducting commerce. But this lack of payments infrastructure constrains both the private and especially the public sector. So the private sector can still do things like hawala and do like trading within exclusive networks. And you have Marwadi families with one brother in Bombay and one in Aden and one in Singapore. And within the family, you kind of exchange goods and services and know the payment will take place. But the public sector is highly constrained by the fact that these payments have to follow a relatively porous human chain. And I think, fixing, we have probably the architect of the modern Indian welfare state sitting in this room, right? Like, and in the past 10 years, right? Like, we've had this significant expansion of this welfare state. And it's kind of inevitable, given that India is democratized way before it got developed, that we will always be a welfare state. And so in that context, fixing the leaky pipes and trying to improve service delivery becomes pretty first order. So you can think about payments technologies as, at one level, it's just state capacity, right? So we've focused an enormous amount of attention on policies and not nearly enough on implementation capacity. So the most basic level, this is about implementation capacity for whatever program the state wants to conduct. And even more broadly, I think of it as public infrastructure, a bit like roads and railways and the internet, because when governments built roads and railways, they built them not for commerce, they built them to get troops to the border quickly. When you built the internet, it was to kind of facilitate intra-government communication in the military, but all of these things ended up having massive spillovers into the private sector. And so you could think about payments infrastructure as being kind of starting out as state capacity, but more broadly as a class of public infrastructure. So there's perhaps no kind of initiative that's kind of, been more widely talked about and controversial. I'm sure this will show up as the UID initiative. And just to kind of highlight some statements of the promise, this has kind of been called a game changer. But as with all cases, marketing is usually 5 steps ahead of the product. So there's many reasons to be highly skeptical about whether or not you'll in fact get these big gains. And the reasons to be skeptical are several. The most basic reasons start with implementation challenges. This is just hard to do. I mean, it's highly non-trivial to get hundreds of lakhs and crores of people enrolled in these systems. Even if you manage to implement something like the biometric payment system, there are political vested interests that will come back and subvert these things. And we've seen several cases of the binding constraint not being technology, but rather things being subverted by vested interests. John and Ritika and others have kind of expressed a lot of concerns about exclusion errors in particular. So you might reduce corruption, but if that's coming at the cost of the weakest and most vulnerable, then it's not obvious you want to do that. Then this is kind of the perverse effects which, It's sad to say this, but corruption might almost be the lubricant necessary to move the system at the lowest level. So if you shut out the capacity to make money completely, then the field assistant has no interest in actually putting up this project. If you think there are some supply-sided kind of constraints, then completely cutting out his ability to make money might in fact perversely come and bite you unexpectedly. And then fundamentally, there's issues of cost effectiveness. So even if you look at the NIPFP estimates on cost effectiveness, the estimates in Aadhaar, these are all highly, depend on a lot of untested assumptions. So what are we doing here? So from the beginning, when we heard about the UID, we were very interested in trying to evaluate the impact. But it became clear very quickly that the Aadhaar is only an enabling infrastructure, that there's no way to evaluate this sensibly unless it's integrated with a particular program. So it's only in that context that you can say something about the impact of this kind of infrastructure on reducing corruption. So we end up in the wonderful state of Andhra Pradesh, right, where the AP Smart Card program, in many ways, is kind of the functional precursor, like integrating biometrics with payments. And the difference here is, unlike in Aadhaar, that you're kind of getting out the numbers, this is integrated from the very beginning. Now, it is version 1.0, so Nandan will say, like, this is offline authentication with the card, whereas they envisage interoperability across CSPs and online authentication. So all of those differences exist, but at a basic level, the functionality is the same, which is you're integrating biometrics and secure payments infrastructure with payments in these programs. And so what we did was work with the government of Andhra Pradesh to conduct this massive randomized evaluation, where we basically randomized the rollout of these biometrically authenticated EBPs across 158 mandals, and this is integrated with NRE GSM assessments. Okay? And so what's nice about this is when you do this at this kind of scale, this probably is the largest RCT, at least that I know of. Somebody should tell me if it's not. But what we're estimating is not kind of a randomized evaluation of some chota NGO program that can't be scaled up. This is the government's program, scaled up as is. And so these estimates correctly reflect the complex logistical, administrative, political challenges that accompany implementation at scale, and it's going to be relevant to informing these policy debates. So I don't need to spend too much time on this. Everybody kind of knows how the payment system works, but it's just worth highlighting what are the three choke points where the leakage mostly happens. So since the GP at this level, the FA kind of controls both the upward flow of the work data, and when the money comes down to the post office, a lot of the collusion takes place here because the FA can often control multiple passbooks, like from key in hand. You don't need to be there physically to withdraw your money, and so you can easily collude with the post office and siphon off money. So three main margins of leakage. First are the ghosts, the musters reported for people who don't exist. The second, which is much more common, is over-reporting, which is you've done 10 days of work, I report 30 days, and the money for 30 days comes, I give you 10 and I siphon off the 20, and nobody knows, at least the beneficiary is not aware that this has taken place. And the last margin is just underpayment, right? Which is, I need to give you 1,000 rupees, I say here's 500 rupees, take it or leave it, and I have all the power to that. So at least, our sense from earlier work from Paul and Sandeep is that while blatant underpayment might be an issue in parts of India that have more feudal histories, at least in Andhra, where people are more empowered, most of the leakage happens to be not underpayment, but really just over-reporting. So it's much, much less politically costly to steal from a distant taxpayer than it is to steal from the villager right there. So the prior work on the margins of leakage indicate that most of it is coming from over-reporting. Okay? So what does the new system do? It's basically kind of creating this separate payments infrastructure where you have banks who now own these accounts, beneficiaries are enrolled with a biometric smart card, and then the bank partners with the technology service provider, customer service provider pair to kind of do cash management and cash delivery in the last mile. So the CSP delivers cash and authenticates the recipient. So notice that this is doing two things, okay? The entire intervention is not just about biometrics. It's moving payments closer by virtue of the CSP, and it's also doing biometrics, right? And so I'll talk a little bit about how one might distinguish between the channels of impact. And then if I had more time, I'd tell you more about the CSP, but GOAP probably has kind of best-in-class guidelines on the CSP needing to be from the village, being a woman from weaker sections, not being connected to the head and stuff like that. Okay? So this is how it works. People know this. Technically, you don't need the card. There are a couple of ESPs managed to just hold the biometrics on the device itself, but the default method was in fact to have a card that you swipe, it pulls up your record, like it will match your fingerprint, and then your account is pulled up and you get paid. Okay? So this is now just thinking through the mechanisms of how exactly a program like this would have an impact, right? So you're doing two things. You're doing EBT through CSPs and you're doing biometrics. So time to collect, it should help because the CSP is closer to term. It could help if the lookup is faster, but it could hurt if every round of authentication takes time and is kind of holding up the process. Payment delays, it could help by automating the process, or it could hurt if the TSP mishandles cash management in the last mile. And then the biggest margin of effect really is here, right? Because if you look at over-reporting, it's now, if I report you've done 30 days and you've done 10 days, I can't siphon off that money because that money shows up in your account and only you can withdraw your money, okay? Now, of course, this is India, and this doesn't mean we cut down leakage, eliminate leakage, because the FA can still collude, okay? I can still say I'll report 30 days, you just give me a kickback, okay? Like, I mean, so you can still have that, but notice what you've done is you've moved the bargaining power now towards the beneficiary because the money now goes to their account. Okay? So, this is not, we can't expect that this is going to eliminate corruption, but it's just making it much costlier because I now have to strike individual deals with every villager to kind of get the kickback if I'm over the limit. Okay? And then I've already talked about underpayment products. So what do? We had an MOU with the government of Andhra Pradesh starting in 2010 where these biometrics were being rolled out. And I'll come back to how we got this window, which is actually quite interesting. Randomized basically these bundles into 3 phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The phase 1 was covered first, and there's a 2-year gap between rolling out the biometric smart cards in phase 1 and phase 3. There's this 24-month lag, and we have these very, very detailed household surveys, okay, which start with the official records of the beneficiary lists, work and payment history, and we draw a representative sample and have almost 17,000 household surveys that between the baseline and end. So this is a massive data collection effort that we made over this 2-year period, and we're measuring, this is across about 886 villages, and you collect data on program participation, benefits received, payment collection, outside regulatory projects. Okay? So here's a map of our wonderful state of Andhra Pradesh, and now we can claim external validity, but we've done this in 2 states. Okay? So what you'll see is you've got, so one thing that's important is that the randomization is stratified all the way down at a sub-district level. Okay, so I'm not going to be picking up like treatment in one area, control in the others. Everything is going to have sub-district fixed effects. So you're picking up everything of variation of pretty much identical agroclimatic zones and other factors. So this is just, it's, I'm not going to have time to go through what an RCP really does, but this is one of those, look Ma, this is why I spent all this time. Okay, so it's just, this is what this buys you. Okay, so what is studying with a large-scale RCP like this is look at the treatment and control means, and they're basically identical on every kind of key metric that you might be interested in. And we stratify, of course, so that helps as well. Okay? So bottom line is, what this means is any estimates I'm going to pick up are purely reflecting the impact of the smart card program and not confounded by any of these other correlates that are correlated with program implementation. Okay? So quickly on implementation, so this turns out to be highly, highly non-trivial. We can talk a lot more about how each of these challenges are an issue. So one thing that John Ritika will be happy to know is that the easiest thing the government could do to mandate the smart cards would be to say we will stop uncarded payments. And they issued these GOs about 8 times in the course of the 2 years of the project. But that never really works. Okay? So you always end up rolling it. So in the end, what happens is you convert a GP when at least 40 to 50% of households are enrolled. But once that conversion happens, everybody still gets paid. It's just that they're now paid through the CSP as opposed to being paid through the old system. Okay. Now, what's going on in GOAP's favor, of course, is kind of enormous administrative commitment to the project. But from an implementation perspective, I really want to highlight the importance of this one bank, one district model. See? Because what they did was they basically handed out contracts to different districts to different banks. And up front, this has a lot of cost, okay? Because the coordination cost of managing different districts by different banks is non-trivial. So on the other hand, Bihar, for their eShakti project, contracted the whole thing to one vendor. But that turns out to be much higher risk because the vendor went belly up and that project hasn't moved in 4 or 5 years. Whereas here what GOAP was able to do was, it's really hard to do procurement on the basis of say, here I have 12 bids, you can't figure out who's good. But over time, they were able to basically kind of move the contracts from the non-performing banks towards the performing banks and therefore let kind of the better ones emerge to the top. So why that was important for us is in 2010, they were reassigning contracts for 8 of these districts, where these 8 districts had banks like that hadn't done a good job, and that was what gave us the window for randomization. And the timing is perfect, because I don't want to run a fancy experiment, but the model itself hasn't stabilized, right? So if you're kind of constantly tinkering with your model, then what are you evaluating, even when you randomize? So here the model itself had stabilized, at the point we did this, and that's what made the RCP make sense. So given kind of these pushes and these pushbacks, at the end of 2 years, we reached about 50% of coverage in terms of 50% of beneficiaries were carded. About 80% of villages got converted. So the real challenge was saturating within a village. So you enroll in a camp mode, you get about 50-60%, but mopping up that last 100%, that last 30-40% is highly non-trivial. And so we didn't quite know what to make of this. And then we had this amazing comment we got at a seminar that said, in fact, this is a stunningly good performance relative to large program implementation in kind of other places. So the US Social Security Administration took 15 years to fully transition from paper checks to electronic transfers. Okay, so it just highlights that these are highly non-trivial problems, and getting 50% done in 2 years, that is pretty critical. So for those who think complex implementation in W is easy, I have 2 words for you. Okay? So this is not easy to do, whether you're in the US. So it turns out that this is actually pretty critical. Okay? So in my last 7 minutes, let me get you the key impacts. So what we do is, as you can follow the cyclicality of the NREGS work, it makes no sense surveying in the lean season. So our survey goes in about 6 weeks after the peak work season, and we're asking about work done, payments received, and everything about the spell, the 6 weeks of work, just corresponding to that. So this is exactly 2 years apart. So the impacts, there are 3 or 4 main. So this is kind of the first set of impacts, which is that on the payment process. And what you see is very substantial gains in terms of reduction in time to collect payments. So these are all ITTs, okay? So I took out the estimating equation in use of time. So these are all intention to treat, and you get about a 20% reduction in time to collect under NREGS. You get almost a 30% reduction in time delays, okay? So the average is 34, and that comes down by 10. In fact, yesterday one concern was that GOAP looks bad because this is above the mandated norm, but it shouldn't, GOAP shouldn't suffer for being transparent, because I'm sure they are better than almost any other state on this metric. But the lag between work and getting paid falls by almost 30%. So that's kind of this 10-day reduction. And also from the perspective of the beneficiary, the unpredictability, the variance and the deviation between the work done and getting paid also falls significantly by about 40%. Okay? So on all these key metrics of payment performance, you're doing significantly better under the new system. Okay? So the next part is then what happens with leakage. And you see that there's no change in official disbursals, but significant increases in what households report receiving, which means you get a significant reduction in leakage. Okay? Where the leakage is just defined as the outlay minus what the households are having. Now there's one problem, and one problem here is, notice that my absolute estimate of leakage is negative, okay? Which means households are saying they're getting more money than what is paid out. Okay? So what is going on? And it turns out what's going on is that we sample on the basis of job cards. Okay? But when you go to the household, they report income received based on all the work done in the house, because he doesn't know I've sampled job card 1 and not job card 2. So if we then go look at the NSS data, the average household conditional on having a job card has about 1.9 job cards. So if you then scale up these estimates based on the district level inflation factors, you basically get an estimate of leakage of about 30% in control and 18.7% in treatment. So that's a reduction of almost 40% in leakage. And this is happening at 50% implementation. So the remaining 50% that's not converted, still all the loopholes are open, right? So it's not surprising that you still have a substantial amount of leakage, but you're getting pretty significant effects. Okay? Now I'm going to skip these 2 things because, I mean, one concern is this collusion? Okay, so is this just, you know, I'm now kicking you back more money and you're just saying you've got more money and you haven't actually done the work. So we also have independent work site audits that when we send our own teams to make surprise visits to work sites and count how many workers there are. So this is a very noisy process, unlike measuring teacher absence, because I don't have a roster of who's supposed to be there. But even when you do this, you basically get that there's a proportional increase in work done in the treatment area. And it does not reflect coercion or intimidation, because about 20%, so Soumya, this is all because of you, right? Like, you know what I mean? So in about 20% of cases, we do get people being told that they're being told to lie about how much work if somebody comes and asks. Okay, so that's partly the social audit off to Banawa, but we're not finding any significant difference on have you been asked to lie as a function of treatment control. So I mean, those are the 2 main threats to our interpretation, and we don't think that. Okay. So in spite of the reduction, we see an increase in access to work, and I don't have time to show the non-parametrics, but basically it looks like what's going on is there's about 20% of households in whose name work is being reported. So these are not ghosts, these are quasi-ghosts, because they are dormant job cards on which income is being reported but no income is being transferred. And that is where you're getting the effect on the extensive margin that about 20% more households are saying that they have done NREGS work in the study period in the treated areas. Okay? Now, of course, the access and availability is still low in the sense that is it available whenever anyone wants it? Only 3.5% say yes. But this 2.6 percentage point increase in that is almost a 60% increase on a very, very low base. Okay? So distributions, the distribution, the key outcomes actually first order stochastically dominate. So nobody is worse off. So any control household in any treatment household in any percentile of the distribution is at least as well off as a corresponding household in the same percentile of the control distribution. So the paper has the non-parametrics on all of these things. Now, this is then part which is non-experimental, but I think it's very important because I think it is very interesting to know how much of this is just because the CSP is at the village and how much do you actually need the biometric. Okay? Because there's two things going on over here. So this is a non-experimental decomposition, and I'm just showing you that I'm breaking it down between carded GPs and uncarded GPs, and you see all the effects are being driven by carded GPs, which is assuring to know that that's the mechanism. But now, within the carded GP, if I break it down by do you have a smart card or don't have a smart card, you see both groups are benefiting the same in terms of time reduction. So as long as the GP is converted, everybody gets the benefit, okay, even if you don't actually have the card because the payment has come closer to you. Okay, so you don't need the biometrics to get the payment benefits. But on leakage, if you look at columns 7 and 8, so first of all the leakage reduction is only in the carded GPs. But now if I break this down by do you have a card or do you not have a card, all the leakage reductions are only coming in the cases when you have the biometrics on the card. Okay, so this is non-experimental, but it does suggest pretty strongly to me that conversion appears to have been key to the time saving, while the biometrics appears to have been key for the leakage reduction. Okay. So last two slides. Strong beneficiary support for the new system. Okay, so this is not just that they kind of saying, "Acha, we have to tell you we like it." They're very upfront about what is good and what is bad. Okay, so 77% say it increases the speed of payments. 2/3 say they make fewer trips. 70% say they have a better chance of getting the right money. 72% say no one else can collect the money. But there's also negatives. Okay, so 28% have problems enrolling. 54% say they're afraid of losing the card and being denied a payment. 50% are worried that when they go to collect the payment, the reader will not work. Okay, so the point is, if you sit and make policy by anecdote, okay, you can easily kind of tell a story from any end of the distribution. Okay, you need large sample data that aggregates these preferences, and then when you ask, do you prefer this over the old system, you get 84%, it means saying that you do prefer. So this becomes very important for the political economy of concentrated costs and diffuse benefits, because the vested interests whose rents are being cut out are not going to come and say, don't do the program because I can't make money. They're going to come and say, don't do the program because this poor pensioner is not able to get his money. Right? So, and he's going to magnify these few negative stories, and till you get the large sample data, you're not going to be able to address something. Okay? So the last part then is cost effectiveness. So these are the administrative costs of implementing the program in crores per year in the 8 study districts. So this is based on the 2% administrative cost to the banks, which covers all costs, the bank, PSP, CSP, and everything. And what you find is simply monetizing the time saving alone pays for the entire program. Okay? So this is just the time saving from being able to collect, and we are in fact just using the June wage as kind of calculating the opportunity cost of balance. That alone pays for it. Now, from an economist perspective, like I mean, the other two gains are not correct. So this is a pure efficiency gain. Okay, there's no loss here. Now, in terms of reducing the payment delay, that's not a Pareto improvement because I'm moving the float from the bank to the household. Okay, so the bank is losing the float and the household is gaining the cash. So, but pricing the float, this is at 5% of savings, whereas cost of credit to the household is obviously much higher. Right? I mean, so that's about 26%. So even if you're utilitarian with equal weights on these kind of on the dollar values, you find a significant effect. And if you favor the poor more, then of course this is an even more welfare improving policy. And finally, the reduced leakage is about 9 times the cost of implementing the program. So again, the economist will insist on putting this in grey and not black because it's not a Pareto improvement, right? Because I'm cutting out the middleman who's losing money. So the only efficiency gain is the reduction in distortion, which I can't quantify. So if you put a 0 weight on the utility loss to the corrupt middleman, then this is pure gains. Even if you put more weight on the poor than the corrupt middleman, this is going to be positive. Okay? So basically, I am done. Oh, okay, sorry. So if you give me 3 minutes extra, this is what would be a completely second paper, okay? But I have to say this in the context of what Abhirup said and something that's going to show up tomorrow morning. So initially, all of this was one paper and there's too much going on, so we've split this off. But one of the really awesome things about randomizing at scale, as opposed to randomizing an individual village, is we can study the GE effects in terms of the spillovers on the open labor market, okay? So coming back, are we looking for instruments for NREGS implementation? This is kind of as cool as you can because it's randomized at an entire mandal level. So, and obviously the big theoretical question here is, to what extent is NREGS acting as an effective wage floor on the rural labor market and giving you a boost on the private labor market? Okay, so what we have is all of the data I've shown you so far on process and preference all suggest that smart cards made NREGS more attractive. And the question is, was there an impact on the private labor market? And we find modest, significant positive effects on outside market wages, about 5 to 6%. And what's nice is we also have data on reservation wages. So it's moving one for one with the stated reservation wage. Okay, and so Clement will talk about this tomorrow. And the prior work estimates the wage impacts of about 5 to 6%. And so what this is suggesting is impacts a better implementation out of the same order of magnitude as the entire program itself. Now, of course, Laura's estimates are different, so we'll find out tomorrow, what to make of the range of these outside effects. But so this is now going to be a separate paper. There's just too much going on. So I just put this in the interest of tomorrow. So my summary is, smart card has kind of significant impacts on the real world implementation, significantly better payments experience, faster, more predictable, lower leakage, strong support, highly cost effective. And I think for all practical purposes, this has to be a lower bound, right? Because we're only calculating gains for 2 public programs. We're not looking at gains from integrating the whole range of other programs, and we're not looking at the possible private sector benefits. So let me stop there.